Hey everyone, this is Baylor from Scooby-Dooby-Doo on YouTube, and in this video I'm actually going to show you how to write a PHP class. So you may have heard that there's a thing called object-oriented programming, and it's kind of strange and it's kind of weird to get used to, and there are a lot of kind of reasons behind it that I have that. You have to realize I've never had a PHP. Well, actually, I had a friend give me. I've never read a PHP book. Let me do it like that. So I really don't know enough about. I don't know like all the terms and stuff. But the way I do object-oriented programming is basically what you have is an object, and you can give stuff to that object. Now I know that's kind of like, well, duh, that's object-oriented code. What I mean is just like. Normally what you would do is once you know how to write functions, you just write a ton of functions, and you would say, well, these go to a user, okay? And you would just write all these, you'd create like a file, and you'd say, this are user functions, and you'd have all these functions like get username by ID and things like that. Well, that really needs to be put into a class because you're working with an object, and this object is a user, and that user has different things. He has a username, he has an ID, he has an email address. These are all just out of the hat right off the top of my head right now. But you get the general idea that we're working with an object. So that's what I'm going to show you in this video. So let's create a class. So a class is written very easily. It's a class just like that. And what we'll do is, after that, we declare what our class name is. Okay, so here we'll call this our user. Let's do it like that. Okay, now this is case sensitive, by the way. Okay, so let's just call it user. Let's just do it in lowercase. Okay, so now we have our class, and we've actually specified this class, and it's kind of similar to a function. Inside this class, you can declare variables and functions, and you can do different things with that class. Now, classes get really advanced and complicated, so this will probably be 2 or 3 videos long. So I can kind of break up the different parts of classes. But let's go ahead and initialize this class. So right now this class won't do anything, but we're going to initialize that class by coming down here, and we're going to say our user. Now this variable does not have to be the same name. I can call this Bob if I wanted to. Okay? So no worries, you don't have to try to use the same variable or the class name here. So once we've done that, what we're going to do is we're going to say our user is equal to a new user. Okay? So here you can say we're saying a new user. User here is this class name. Now if I made that a capital U, then I had to make a capital U here. Okay? So with that already, we have created a class and we initialized this class. Okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to store a variable in this class. Okay, so let's create a variable. In a class, you use a variable like this. You'd say var, and here you'd create your variable name. So let's create ours as username. Okay, so this is going to be our user's username, and we're going to make that equal to Baylor. Actually, I think I do this most of the time when I get the chance. Okay, so that's my username, Baylor Ray, and what I can do is I can actually get that username. And the way you do that is you would come down, and we're going to echo out. Now we want to get the username from our username class or our user class. So what we're going to do is we have this instance of our user. So we're going to say we want to echo our user. Now notice this little arrow, and that's where we're actually getting something inside this class, and we want to get the username variable. Okay, so here you can see we have a user. We're calling this variable, and here with this username, we're actually calling this username here. So when I reload, what I'm going to get is my username here. Okay, so that should be pretty simple to follow. Basically, this is just you can call that as a dot. So user.username. I don't really know the best way to call that. Okay, so let's create a function for our user. So what I want to be able to do. Now, usernames, we can keep this here. Classes have a thing called a constructor function. Okay, so a constructor function is, I'm just going to run this little keyboard shortcut that I have here. But basically what you do is you write your normal function syntax here. So function, give it a function name. Now the function name has to be __construct. okay, just like that. And you might, if you're using a web IDE or an editor that has syntax highlighting like this, where everything has its own individual color, so you can kind of look at it and know what you're doing, it should have its own custom color. Okay, now if you want to learn more about these functions and stuff, it's called like a magic function or whatever. You just go to php.net and search for class, and you can get a list of special functions that you can do. There are different functions, and I'll probably talk about them in this video so you can get a better understanding of a class. Okay, so with this constructor function, what it's going to do is it's automatically going to run. Okay, so when I say new user, it's going to run this function. So we can here say echo hello world, and let's get down and get rid of this echo. And when I reload, you can see we get hello world. So you can see that it ran this function. Now let's go ahead and make it where when we create a new user, we want to give a username. So in our function, we're going to say this has a username, and this username is required, so we can't make it equal to null or whatever. And up here where we have our variable, that's just going to be a variable like this. Now we don't have to give it a value because it's just a variable that's going to be a placeholder. Okay, so let's go ahead and come down here, and what we're going to say is when we run this function, we want to make this username equal to the username supplied here. Okay, so it's going to be kind of confusing, but you'll see. The way we target this username here is we're going to have to call our class, and the way we do that is we say this. Okay, so when you can only use this variable, you can only use the variable that I have selected, this, inside of a class. Okay, you can't use it outside of a class. And basically what it's doing is it's calling our user, or this class. So in this case, it's calling our user class. And we could do similar things that we did down here. We're going to call the username, so we'll say user name. Okay, so here we're saying this, which is referring to our class, and we're saying we want to get the username, so it's calling this username variable, and we're going to say this is equal to username. Okay, so this is kind of confusing. Basically, so here I showed you that we're calling this username variable, and we're saying it's equal to the username that you pass to the constructor function. Okay, now the way you actually run the constructor function is you just add your parentheses here. And here I'm going to do my Baylor array again, and we'll go ahead and echo out that username. When I come over here and reload, you can say I get Baylor array. Okay, so let's actually create another variable. We'll call this second variable. We'll call that name. Okay, so if you had some type of user system on your website, you would probably want to have a name and username, things like that, that just kind of set that person to have his own profile or whatever. So let's go ahead and make a function that we can give this a value, okay? So let's create a function down here. So here you can see I'm just writing a normal function, and I'm going to call this function set value. Okay, and we're going to say we want to get the type, or the, don't really know, let's just call it type. Okay, and type is going to be equal to name or username. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say switch, and I'm going to say switch to the type, and yeah, we'll just do this, and then I'll show you another way you could do this. We're going to have a case, and we're going to say case name. We'll make this name equal to, oh, we need to also set, that doesn't need to be here. We'll go ahead and set type equal to, and we'll also have a value, okay? So we'll say this name is equal to value, and we could do this for our username as well, okay? But I'm not going to do it because it just takes a long time. So basically we've created this function. It's called set value. We have a type and we have a value. And what we're doing is saying we're switching through the type and we're looking for name. And when we find name, what we're going to do is make this name equal to value. So we're actually going to give this variable a value. So if I say I want to echo out name, let's just reload. We don't get anything on our page. But if I run user set value, I want to set it for my name, and I'll make this equal to Baylor array. Okay, and if I come back over here and reload, see, now I have my name, and I can even call my username. Okay, so you can see that we're easily able to set a value, and we're also able to call that value as well. Now, this is one method that I've done, but right now that's kind of strange, you know. So what I want to do, well, it's not strange, but it takes a lot of work. Like if I came over here and I created a new variable, months down the road, and I said, oh, I also have an email address, okay, or email address. I know people are like, dude, Baylor, you're not saying it right. Well, I don't really care. As long as you know what I'm saying, then that's fine with me. Okay, so we have an email address. And what we're going to do is, months down the road, we forget to add our case for the email. Like, I forget to say case email, okay? So later down the road, I can't change that. So what we need to do is we need to find a way to easily set this. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, we're going to say this. Now we're going to call that variable type inside of this. We're going to say it's equal to value, okay? So what are we doing here? Because that's kind of strange. Basically, you know, this is what you need to remember. When you're calling a variable, okay, when I'm calling a variable inside of my class, I do not have to add the $sign. I just have to call the name of it. So these are my vocabulary isn't working very well with this class. If I don't have to call the name of the variable, so I don't have to say, I only have to say email. I don't have to add the $sign. As you see down here, I don't say name like that. So what we're doing here is we're saying type. So in this case, type is equal to name, so it's going to put name right here, okay? It's not, so we're able to actually make a quick shortcut so we can set value name equal to Baylor array like that. Okay, so it's going to take this type, it's going to make this name equal to Baylor array. So if I come down here and reload again, you can see we still get that same Baylor array. And I can duplicate this, and I can say email, and let's do Baylor at example.com. And I reload, and you don't see anything because I didn't echo that out, but we'll say echo email. And I reload, and you see we get Baylor at example.com. So now I can easily and quickly set values, okay? So I just wanted to show you that you can actually call each part of a class by just running a variable, okay? And you can do that with variables, but it's kind of strange. Like you can, I'm not going to talk about it, but you can actually create somewhat dynamic variables, but I won't talk about that right now. But if you want to know what that is and you don't know what I'm talking about, basically you can say $$ like that, variable equal to hello world, okay? And if I had a variable called var equals name, okay, basically what this would do is it would create a variable called name equals hello, okay? So that's what I'm talking about there. Because we have this variable, it's equal to name, and then we're not creating a variable here. We're creating a variable with this variable's text, okay, value. So we're saying, basically we're writing name like that, but we're actually using a variable. Very complicated. It took me a while to understand that, but hopefully I didn't just confuse you and throw you off for a big loop, and you actually understand what I'm talking about. But that's what I call like a dynamic variable, okay, but that's not what it would really be with PHP. Okay, so the next thing that I want to show you is I showed you can run your function. I didn't really explain that. I created a function in here inside this class. Okay, so we're inside the class. I created a function, and I can run that function by calling my instance of the class. So here I have that instance and stored in user. So I can say user, and then set, like here, down here, run a variable. So I select email. Well, I can actually run set value too. Okay, so that's how you run a function. And you can't run the constructor function. So the next thing I want to show you are public and private. Now, those are the two really common ones that I use all the time, and I'm going to explain it. Basically, what we can do is we can say set value is a public. I don't know why I did that, but we'll just come back over here. We'll say our function set value. So this function is a public function. Okay. what that's going to tell PHP is that you can actually run this function outside of the class. So that means I can do this. So if I reload, nothing changes. But if I say setValue is a private function, and I reload, you're going to see I can't call that private method or function. Okay, that is not allowed. Okay, kind of. I'll touch on that in a second. But let's leave it private right now. You can see that I cannot call this. So let's just comment that out and get rid of it. But what I can do, okay, is inside of my class, okay, because it's private, that means I can only call that function if I'm inside the class, okay? So you notice that when I set it to private, outside of the class where I had this instance, I wasn't allowed to do it. I got this error here, okay? But when I'm inside the class, I can do something like this. I could say this set value username equal to the username, okay? So here I'm just kind of rewriting this, and instead of writing username here, I'm actually putting inside this. I'm just writing the set value function I explained earlier. So if I come back over here and reload, let's echo out our username here. See, we get Baylor Ray, and that's because PHP, when you write a private function, you're only allowed to write it inside of the class, okay? You're not allowed to call a private function outside of the class. So that way you can create functions that aren't really important to the class, but they're something that you write a lot, so they're kind of important for the class, but they're not really needed or intended to be used outside of the class. So you can create private functions like that, okay? So I think that's a lot in this video. If you have any questions, because this is kind of complicated stuff that we're getting into, if you have any questions, just kind of tell me, hey, I have a question at this time in the video when you were talking about this or whatever. Could you explain that better? And hey, I'll help you. No worries. Because I really enjoy doing this. So thanks for watching this video. If you have any questions, like I said, you can leave it in the comment section below this video. And goodbye.